Okay, I want you to imagine a civilization, one that was just as grand as ancient Egypt, but way more mysterious. One that built the world's very first planned cities, mastered sanitation thousands of years before the Romans even showed up, and then just vanished. This, right here, is the story of one of history's greatest puzzles. We're talking about the Indus Valley Civilization, or the IVC for short. And at its absolute peak, this was the most widespread urban culture of the entire Bronze Age. I mean, it sprawled across 1 million square kilometers. They built hundreds of settlements, many of which we're actually still digging up today. But for all its incredible size, it's still one of history's biggest enigmas. And right out of the gate, you run into one of its most stunning achievements. I mean, forget about giant pyramids and lavish temples for just a second. The people of the Indus Valley were obsessed with something far more practical and honestly, way more modern: public health and sanitation. Now, to really get this, we have to take a trip to their largest city, a place called Mohenjo-Daro. The name translates to the Mound of the Dead, which, yeah, sounds pretty ominous. But the city itself? It was a total masterpiece of urban engineering, a real prototype for the smart cities we talk about today. The level of detail here is just staggering. Think about this. We're in 2500 BCE, and almost every single house, whether you were rich or poor, had its own indoor washroom. Floors were perfectly sloped to guide wastewater into covered street drains, which then fed into this massive, citywide underground sewage system. And get this, their biggest public building wasn't a palace or a temple. It was the Great Bath, this huge, meticulously built public pool, probably for ritual cleansing. It makes you wonder if their whole ideology was built around the idea of cleanliness. And right in the middle of all this incredible engineering, we find these wonderful, totally human little details. Archaeologists are constantly finding these small pottery figurines, like little animals and carts, clogging up the drains. It turns out the timeless struggle of getting kids to leave their toys in the bath, well, it's at least 4,500 years old. But this obsession with order and planning, it wasn't just in one city. No, this was the blueprint for their entire world, and it was applied with incredible consistency across hundreds and hundreds of miles. The standardization is what's really mind-blowing. The streets were laid out on a perfect grid, kind of like modern-day Manhattan. Their bricks were mass-produced to a consistent 4:2:1 ratio everywhere. And the cities themselves were usually zoned into two main parts: a high citadel for public buildings, and then a lower town where everyone lived. This all points to some kind of powerful central authority with a shared vision of how a city should work. But here's the thing, they weren't rigid about it. They were brilliant adapters. Just look at the Levira, which was built in the middle of an arid desert. Their masterpiece wasn't a bath. It was a massive system of over 16 reservoirs designed to catch every single drop of water. Or take a look at Lothal, right on the coast. They built the world's earliest known tidal dockyard to become masters of maritime trade. So they used the same basic template, but they tailored it perfectly to whatever environment they were in. And then, poof, they were gone. The kind of urban planning you see on the left from the Indus Valley, that level of sophistication wouldn't be seen again in that part of the world for over 1,500 years. It's almost as if the entire concept of a great planned city was just lost to time. And that leads us to our first really big puzzle. For a civilization this organized, this standardized, this powerful, there's something huge missing. You just don't find the kinds of things we associate with pretty much every other ancient empire. Exactly. That's the question, right? How do you engineer hundreds of cities across a vast territory with no obvious emperor, no pharaoh, no king calling all the shots? This comparison really says it all. In Egypt, they built giant pyramids for their dead pharaohs. In Mesopotamia, they built sprawling palaces for their kings. But in the Indus Valley, archaeologists find no definitive palaces, no royal tombs overflowing with treasure, and almost no artwork showing great rulers or battles. Instead, their biggest, most impressive structures were all built for the public. This points to a totally radical idea for the ancient world. Just think about it for a second. A massive civilization that might have completely rejected the idea of a king. The leading theory right now is that power wasn't in the hands of one person, but maybe a council, a group of influential priests or wealthy merchants. And their authority didn't come from an army, but from making sure society ran smoothly. They clearly valued public works way more than personal monuments. And that brings us to what is easily the most frustrating puzzle of all. The whole reason we have to guess and speculate about who their leaders were or what they believed is because we simply cannot read what they wrote. This is the Indus script. It's been found on thousands of tiny seals and tablets, but it's a language that's been completely silent for 4,000 years. If we could just crack this code, it would be like hearing the voices of these ancient people speaking to us directly across time. So, what makes it so tough to crack? Well, for one thing, it was often written in this weird style called boustrophodon. That's one line right to left and the next line left to right. It has hundreds of unique signs. But the real problem, the biggest challenge, is that all the inscriptions we find are incredibly short. Most of them are just a handful of characters long. That makes it almost impossible to find the kind of patterns you need to decode a whole language. And yeah, ultimately, we're missing our key. We have no Rosetta Stone, no tablet with the same text in a known language alongside the Indus script. That's how we famously unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs. Until someone finds an Indus equivalent, the minds of these people are going to remain a closed book. Which leaves us with the final mystery. Why did this incredible civilization just disappear? For decades, everyone imagined some dramatic invasion, or maybe a catastrophic earthquake. But the latest science? It paints a much slower and, frankly, a much more familiar picture. Yeah, there was no single dramatic event, no sudden collapse. All the evidence we have points to a really gradual decline over several centuries. The great cities just slowly emptied out as people abandoned them for smaller villages in the countryside. The big question is, why? Well, this timeline, which has been built from climate data, basically tells the story. Around 4,500 years ago, the reliable monsoon rains that their entire agricultural system depended on, they started to get weaker and more erratic. The whole region got hammered by a series of punishing century-long droughts. Their amazing water systems, which had supported these huge cities, they just started to fail. People had to move on, and the very foundation of their urban world slowly crumbled under all that relentless climate pressure. It's a pretty humbling lesson. These people, the people of the Indus Valley, were absolute master engineers. They could manage water better than almost anyone on Earth at the time, and yet, even they couldn't engineer their way out of long-term climate change. It's a really powerful reminder that even the most advanced societies are, in the end, completely dependent on a stable environment. So that's what we're left with, an ancient society that shows public good over personal glory, that engineered wonders of the urban world, and yet was slowly unraveled by the forces of nature. Their silent script still holds their secrets, but their empty cities offer a warning that echoes loud and clear to us today.